Before I begin, if you've ever lived through betrayal like this, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. My name is Farah, and for 12 years I believed I had the kind of marriage people quietly envied. Not flashy, not perfect, but steady. The kind of love built from shared grocery lists, inside jokes, late-night tea, and folded laundry. My husband, Imran, was gentle in public, reserved at home, and reliable in ways that made me feel safe. We met in our 20s, when the world felt wide and uncertain, and we built something that looked solid from the outside. I was proud of us. I told people we grew together, and I meant it. We didn't have children, not by choice exactly, but by timing that never seemed right. First, it was his career, then it was my mother's illness, then finances, then years had passed and we simply settled into a quiet life of two. I told myself that companionship was its own blessing, and for a long time I believed it. Imran worked in finance, long hours, endless emails, business trips that sometimes came suddenly. I trusted him completely. I never checked his phone, never asked for passwords, never tracked his movements. I was the kind of wife who believed trust was an act of love, not a test. Looking back now, I realize how many small signs I ignored, not because I was blind, but because I didn't want to be suspicious. I thought suspicion was poison. I thought love meant choosing faith every day. It began with a simple thing. One afternoon, my laptop stopped working. I had online banking to do, and Imran was still at work. I called him to ask if I could use his computer when he got home. He said yes, casually, without hesitation. That night, after dinner, he went to shower, and I opened his laptop. His email was already logged in. I didn't plan to snoop. I told myself I wouldn't. I opened the browser to check my bank account. But as the page loaded, a new email popped into his inbox. The subject line caught my eye. "Miss you already. Last night was perfect." My hand froze on the mouse. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears. Maybe it was spam, I thought. Maybe some marketing nonsense. But the sender's name was a woman's name, not a company, not an automated address, a real person. I should have closed the laptop. I should have walked away, but curiosity mixed with fear held me in place. I clicked. "Imran, I can still smell your cologne on my pillow, counting the days until your next trip. Love, Sana." I read it 3 times, each time hoping the words would change, but they didn't. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was confusion. As if I'd stumbled into someone else's life by mistake. My mind tried to build explanations. Maybe it was an old friend. Maybe it was some misunderstanding. Maybe. Then another email arrived. "Same hotel next week. I'll wear the red dress again." There was no misunderstanding. I sat there staring at the screen while the shower ran down the hallway. My fingers were cold. My stomach felt hollow. My entire understanding of my life tilted sideways in one quiet moment. When Imran came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, humming lightly, I forced a smile. I told him I finished what I needed. I closed the laptop gently and handed it back as if it wasn't holding a bomb inside it. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened to his breathing beside me. The same breathing I once found comforting now felt foreign, like a stranger had crawled into my bed wearing my husband's skin. In the morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work. I watched him go, and when the door closed, I stood in the living room feeling like the walls were closing in around me. I spent the day in a daze. I washed dishes that were already clean. I folded towels that didn't need folding. I replayed every moment of our past year, every late meeting, every business trip, every night he came home a little distant, every time I told myself not to overthink. By evening, something in me hardened. Not anger yet, something colder, a need for truth, not assumptions, not guesses, proof. When Imran fell asleep that night, I waited. I watched the slow rhythm of his chest. I listened until I was sure he was fully asleep. Then I gently lifted his phone from the bedside table. My hands shook as I turned it on, but the screen lit up with a familiar pattern unlock. My birthday. The irony almost made me laugh. His email app was right there. I opened it, and there they were. Dozens of messages, intimate, detailed, full of planning, longing, hotel names, flight confirmations. They'd been seeing each other for nearly a year. A year. While I cooked his meals, washed his clothes, asked about his day, celebrated our anniversary. One email stood out. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. I promise, Sana, soon. Soon. My throat tightened, not because he was cheating, that was already clear, but because he was planning a future with her, a life without me, while I sat across from him every night, believing we were fine. Tears finally came, silent and hot, not sobbing, just steady, as if grief had decided to flow calmly, without drama. I could have woken him up. I could have screamed, thrown the phone, demanded answers. But something unexpected settled in my chest. Clarity. If he wanted to rewrite my life behind my back, then I would not let him control the story. If he was going to lie, I would make sure the truth had a voice. Not through rage, not through chaos, but through evidence, his own words, his own emails. I took screenshots. Every message, every date, every hotel confirmation. I forwarded copies to a new email account I quietly created under my name. I stored everything carefully, methodically, like someone archiving history. By the time the call to prayer echoed faintly through the night air, I was done. I placed the phone back where it was. I lay down beside him. My tears had stopped, my breathing steady again. He slept peacefully, unaware that the life he thought he was controlling had just shifted in silence. The next morning, I made him breakfast, paratha, eggs, his favorite chai. He smiled, thanked me, scrolled his phone, and left for work like every other day. And as I watched him walk out the door, I whispered to myself, quietly, with a strange calm I'd never felt before, "You have no idea what's coming." Because I wasn't going to beg him to stay. I wasn't going to scream for answers he'd only twist. I was going to let the truth speak in a way he couldn't deny. And I was just getting started. For the next few days, I moved through life like someone wearing a mask that fit too tightly. From the outside, nothing had changed. I woke up before Imran, made tea, asked him if he slept well, reminded him not to skip lunch. He smiled, thanked me, and left. Every morning, every evening, a routine so normal it almost convinced me I had imagined everything. But inside, I was different. I carried a secret heavier than any suitcase, a folder of evidence tucked safely in a hidden email account. Screenshots that proved my husband's love was no longer mine alone. Sometimes in the quiet afternoon hours, I opened those messages again, not to torture myself, but to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that this was real, that I had not misunderstood, because there were moments when doubt crept in, whispering, "Maybe it's not what you think. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you should just ask him." But then I'd read his words to her again, and the doubt would die. I spent a long time thinking about confrontation. How would I even say it? "I saw your emails. I know about Sana." Every version I imagined ended in him denying, twisting, blaming. I knew Imran well. He was calm under pressure, a man who could speak softly while hiding sharp edges. If I confronted him without a plan, I would walk away with nothing but pain and no proof. So instead of acting on impulse, I planned. First, I needed to understand the full picture. Who was Sana? How deep was this? Was she just an affair, or was she already replacing me? One evening, when Imran stayed late at work, I opened his email again. This time, I searched her name, their message threads, travel bookings. I built a timeline. Their first message dated 11 months ago. Casual at first, work-related, then friendly, then flirtatious, then intimate, then hotel bookings, weekend trips, gifts exchanged. I felt sick, but I kept going. I took notes like an investigator, dates, locations, promises. I discovered he had told her he was stuck in a loveless marriage, that I didn't understand him, that he felt trapped. Trapped. The word made me sit back in my chair and laugh softly, bitterly. I thought of the nights I waited up for him, the lunches I packed, the bills I managed, the way I defended him to relatives who said he worked too much. If he was trapped, he had built the cage himself. Then I found something else, an email from Sana asking, "Are you sure your wife won't cause trouble when you leave?" And his reply, "She won't see it coming." That was the moment something inside me hardened like stone. He wasn't just cheating, he was planning an exit, quietly, strategically, without giving me the dignity of truth. Fine, I thought, then I will plan too. The next step was understanding my own position, my finances, the house, the accounts. Everything was joint. I had always trusted him with money. Now I opened every statement, every account detail. I made copies. I sent them to my secret email. I listed what was in my name, what was in his, what was shared. I felt like a stranger studying the blueprint of her own life. I called my cousin Nadia one afternoon. She lived in another city, far from our social circle. She was a lawyer. I didn't tell her everything at first, just that I needed advice. She listened carefully as I explained the situation in vague terms. When I finally told her, "He's having an affair," there was a pause. Then she said gently, "Save everything, every message, every financial record. Do not confront him until you're ready." I told her I already had the emails. "Good," she said, "then you have power." Power. It was a strange word to attach to my situation. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired. But her words stayed with me. Over the next week, I played my role perfectly. Loving wife, concerned partner. I asked about his day. I smiled at his jokes. I handed him tea when he looked stressed. Inside, I watched him like a stranger wearing familiar clothes. I noticed things I had ignored before, the way he tilted his phone away from me, how he smiled at messages, how he showered the moment he got home as if washing away guilt. One night he said, "I have another work trip next week." I nodded, stirring the soup. "Where to?" "Lahore." My spoon paused mid-stir. Lahore, the same city from one of the hotel bookings I'd seen. "Oh," I said calmly, "that's far. How long?" 3 days. I smiled. "I'll miss you." He smiled back. "I'll call every night." I watched him eat the soup I had cooked, knowing he would soon sit across from another woman at a restaurant, calling it work. My stomach turned, but I kept my face soft. That night, after he slept, I opened my laptop and wrote a new email to Sana. Not from my account, not revealing who I was, just a simple anonymous message. "I know about you and Imran, I have proof, and I will be revealing the truth soon." I stared at the screen for a long time before sending it. My finger hovered over the button. Was this wise? Was it too early? But I needed to shake their comfort, just a little, to remind them that secrets don't stay buried forever. I clicked send. In the morning, I watched Imran check his phone over breakfast. He frowned slightly, then relaxed. He didn't say anything, but I knew he'd seen something, a small crack in his confident world. Later that day, I checked Sana's reply. None yet, but I knew she'd read it. People always do. As the days moved toward his work trip, I prepared myself mentally, emotionally, financially. I cleaned out a drawer and placed all my documents inside, copies of emails, account statements, identity papers, everything I might need. I called my cousin Nadia one afternoon. She lived in another city, far from our social circle. She was a lawyer. I didn't tell her everything at first, just that I needed advice. She listened carefully as I explained the situation in vague terms. When I finally told her he's having an affair, there was a pause. Then she said gently, "Save everything, every message, every financial record. Do not confront him until you're ready." I told her I already had the emails. "Good," she said, "then you have power." Power. It was a strange word to attach to my situation. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired. But her words stayed with me. Over the next week, I played my role perfectly. Loving wife, concerned partner. I asked about his day. I smiled at his jokes. I handed him tea when he looked stressed. Inside, I watched him like a stranger wearing familiar clothes. I noticed things I had ignored before, the way he tilted his phone away from me, how he smiled at messages, how he showered the moment he got home as if washing away guilt. One night he said, "I have another work trip next week." I nodded, stirring the soup. "Where to?" "Lahore." My spoon paused mid-stir. Lahore, the same city from one of the hotel bookings I'd seen. "Oh," I said calmly, "that's far. How long?" 3 days. I smiled. "I'll miss you." He smiled back. "I'll call every night." I watched him eat the soup I had cooked, knowing he would soon sit across from another woman at a restaurant, calling it work. My stomach turned, but I kept my face soft. That night, after he slept, I opened my laptop and wrote a new email to Sana. Not from my account, not revealing who I was, just a simple anonymous message. "I know about you and Imran, I have proof, and I will be revealing the truth soon." I stared at the screen for a long time before sending it. My finger hovered over the button. Was this wise? Was it too early? But I needed to shake their comfort, just a little, to remind them that secrets don't stay buried forever. I clicked send. In the morning, I watched Imran check his phone over breakfast. He frowned slightly, then relaxed. He didn't say anything, but I knew he'd seen something, a small crack in his confident world. Later that day, I checked Sana's reply. None yet, but I knew she'd read it. People always do. As the days moved toward his work trip, I prepared myself mentally, emotionally, financially. I cleaned out a drawer and placed all my documents inside, copies of emails, account statements, identity papers, everything I might need. I called my cousin Nadia one afternoon. She lived in another city, far from our social circle. She was a lawyer. I didn't tell her everything at first, just that I needed advice. She listened carefully as I explained the situation in vague terms. When I finally told her he's having an affair, there was a pause. Then she said gently, "Imran left early in the morning, suitcase rolling softly across the tile floor. I walked him to the door, handed him a travel snack I had prepared the night before, and kissed his cheek. His skin was warm, familiar, once comforting, now distant. Call me when you land," I said. "I will," he replied, smiling. The door closed behind him and silence settled over the apartment, a silence that felt heavy with everything unsaid. I waited exactly 1 hour before moving, not because I had to, but because I needed to be sure he was on the road to the airport, unreachable, fully committed to the lie he was living. Then I sat at the dining table with my laptop, a cup of untouched tea growing cold beside me, and I began writing. The email was not emotional, not angry, not dramatic. It was simple, direct, and undeniable. Dear Imran, I know about Sana. I have read every message. I have copies of every email, every hotel booking, every promise you made. I know you are in Lahore right now. You once told her I wouldn't see this coming. You were wrong. I paused. My fingers hovered over the keys. My heart beat steady, surprisingly calm. I continued. I will not confront you in person, and I will not argue. The truth is already recorded. By the time you read this, copies of these emails will have been sent to your parents and mine. I suggest you think carefully about your next steps. I attached a zip file, screenshots, evidence, organized, time-stamped, impossible to deny. Then I added the final line. Lies survive in silence. I am no longer silent. I sent it. Immediately after, I forwarded the same email and attachments to his parents, my parents, and my cousin Nadia. I did not add commentary, just the truth, clean and sharp. My hands did not shake. My breathing did not falter. It felt as though I was watching someone else do these things, a version of me made of steel. After everything was sent, I closed the laptop and sat back. The tea was cold now. I drank it anyway. I didn't wait long for the first reaction. My phone rang. It was my mother. Farah, she said, her voice tight. What is this message? Are you sure? Yes, I replied softly. I'm sure. Silence. Then a sigh. Come home if you need to. I will be okay, I said. She didn't ask more. Mothers understand things words can't cover. The next call came from Nadia. You did well. Stay calm. Don't answer his calls yet. Let him sit with the truth. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you. Then, finally, his call came. Imran. His name lit up the screen, the same way it had thousands of times before, only now it felt like a stranger calling. I watched it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't answer. A message followed. Farah, what is this? Call me immediately. Another message. This is insane. Who sent this? Another. Please pick up. I turned off the phone. I knew exactly where he was now, standing somewhere in an airport or a hotel room, staring at a screen that showed his own words betraying him, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet the way it had beneath mine. Only one of us had chosen this, and it wasn't me. I spent that afternoon packing a small bag, not to run away, but to give myself options. I didn't know yet whether I would stay in the apartment or move in with my parents temporarily. I wanted the choice to be mine. As I folded clothes, memories drifted through my mind. Our first apartment, our first vacation, the night he held my hand at my mother's funeral. I didn't feel hatred, just a quiet sadness, a mourning for something that had already died long before I discovered it. Evening came. The sky outside turned deep orange. I sat by the window again, watching cars pass, hearing faint city sounds below. Another call, this time from his mother. Farah, she said, sounding shaken, Imran told us everything. Why didn't you come to us first? I took a slow breath. I didn't need permission to tell the truth. She didn't argue. She couldn't, with evidence in front of her. We're ashamed, she said quietly. You're still family." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." After we hung up, I felt something loosen inside me. A rope that had been tight for days suddenly slackened. That night, I slept alone in our bed for the first time in 12 years. It felt strange, but not unbearable. At 2 a.m., a message arrived from Sana. "Please don't destroy my life. I didn't know he was still with you." I read it twice. There it was, the desperation, the attempt to shift blame. I typed a reply. "I know you had a wife. I saw the messages. I wish you peace, but I will not hide the truth for either of you." I didn't wait for her reply. In the morning, Imran returned. I heard his key in the lock, his suitcase rolling in, his footsteps slowing as he saw me sitting at the dining table, waiting. He looked tired, his eyes red, his confidence gone. "Farah," he began. I raised my hand gently. "There is nothing to discuss." He swallowed. "I can explain." "No," I said calmly. "You already did, in your emails." He flinched, as if struck. I stood up. "I am going to my parents for a while. A lawyer will contact you about separation terms." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came. As I walked to the door with my small bag, I paused, not for him, for myself. 12 years of love, betrayed, but not wasted, because they had taught me something important. Trust is precious, but self-respect is sacred. I opened the door, light from the hallway spilled in, a new beginning waiting just beyond the threshold, and I stepped forward. I stayed with my parents for the first week. My old bedroom still smelled faintly of childhood, rose-water soap and wooden cupboards warmed by the sun. It was strange to sleep under the same ceiling I had grown up under, but this time as a woman carrying a broken marriage in her suitcase. My mother didn't ask many questions. She brought me tea in the mornings, folded laundry beside me in quiet companionship, and sometimes sat at the edge of my bed at night, brushing my hair like she used to when I was a girl. Her silence was not avoidance. It was respect. She knew grief needed space. My father, on the other hand, burned quietly, not with rage, but with disappointment. When he finally spoke about Imran, his voice was calm, but each word carried weight. "A man who lies to his wife will lie to himself eventually. You did the right thing." I nodded. I believed him. But belief and healing were two different journeys. Imran tried to reach me every day. Calls, messages, emails from new addresses, long paragraphs filled with regret, excuses, explanations. He said it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that he never stopped loving me, that he would end it with her, that he wanted to fix us. I didn't reply. Because the truth is, betrayal doesn't end when an affair ends. It ends when trust is rebuilt. And I knew deep inside that I could never trust him again. Nadia arranged a meeting with a family lawyer, a kind woman with tired eyes and a soft voice. She went through everything with me, our assets, the apartment, the joint savings, the process of separation. She spoke in careful, practical terms, grounding my emotions in steps and procedures. "Because you have evidence," she said gently, "you have strong standing. But the most important thing is this: decide what you want, not what you think you deserve." That sentence followed me for days. What did I want? I wanted peace. I wanted stability. I wanted to wake up without dread. I wanted to drink tea in the morning without remembering hotel emails. I wanted to look at myself in the mirror without feeling foolish. And I wanted my life back. A week later, I returned to the apartment. I didn't tell Imran I was coming. I just unlocked the door and walked into the space that had been our shared world. Everything looked the same: the couch cushions, the framed wedding photo on the wall, the pair of slippers by the door. But the energy had changed, like a house that knows a storm passed through. Imran was there, sitting on the couch. He stood up immediately when he saw me. "You're back," he said, voice small. "I'm here to collect my things," I replied. He nodded quickly. "Take the room. I'll stay out here." For the next hour, I moved quietly through the bedroom, packing clothes, books, personal items. I didn't touch shared things, just what belonged to me. My hands moved steadily, without drama. At one point, he appeared at the door. "Farah, please, we can fix this." I kept folding a sweater. "You can fix your behavior. You cannot fix my trust." He exhaled shakily. "It was only one person, only one mistake." I finally looked at him then, really looked. A man I had loved for over a decade, now standing small in a doorway, bargaining for a life he had already broken. "One mistake," I said quietly, "is forgetting to buy milk, not planning a future with another woman." He had no reply. When I finished packing, I walked past him, suitcase in hand. At the door, I paused. "I will email you the lawyer's contact. Please communicate only through her." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." I believed he meant it, but remorse after exposure is not loyalty. It is consequence. I left. Over the next month, life moved forward in small, careful steps. Legal papers, asset division, quiet conversations. No courtroom drama, just two people untying a knot that had held them together for years. Nadia never contacted me again. I heard through distant whispers that Imran had ended things with her, that she left her job, that she moved cities. Their grand plan evaporated the moment it stepped into daylight. I didn't feel satisfaction from that, only a strange confirmation of something I had already learned. Relationships built on secrecy cannot survive truth. Slowly, I began rebuilding my days. I returned to work. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. I started walking in the mornings. I joined a small book club at the local library. I learned to cook meals for one. Learned that silence could be peaceful, not lonely. There were still hard days, moments when I reached for my phone to tell him something, only to remember there was no him to tell anymore. Nights when I replayed the past, wondering where it went wrong. But healing is not erasing memory. It is learning to live beside it without bleeding. One afternoon, months later, I sat in a cafe reading a book. The sun streamed through the window. The air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. I turned a page and suddenly realized something simple and powerful. I was okay. Not fully healed, not perfectly happy, but okay. And that was enough. I thought about the emails that started it all, the proof that shattered my world, and I realized something else. Truth hurts, but lies destroy. If I never opened that laptop, if I had chosen to ignore the signs, if I had stayed silent, I might still be living beside a stranger smiling through a life built on deception. Instead, I chose to see, to act, to protect my dignity, and in doing so, I saved myself. So, if you are listening to my story, sitting in your own quiet doubts, wondering if you are imagining things, wondering if you should speak up, let me tell you this gently. You deserve truth, even when it hurts. You deserve respect, even when someone fails to give it. And you deserve a life where your heart is not a secret someone hides. My name is Farah. This was my story, not of revenge, not of hatred, but of awakening. I lost a husband, but I found myself. The final divorce papers arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at the dining table in my parents' home, sunlight slanting across the surface where I had once done school homework as a child. The envelope lay in front of me, cream-colored and plain, holding the official end of a 12-year marriage. My hands rested on either side of it, still, steady. No shaking, no dread, just a deep, slow breath. My mother sat across from me, peeling apples into a bowl. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. When I opened the envelope, the pages inside were crisp and formal. Legal language, signatures, dates, the division of assets, the confirmation of separation. Everything that once was ours, neatly divided into columns of his and hers. A life reduced to paperwork. I read every line carefully, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to witness it fully. This was not just an ending, it was a boundary, a declaration. I signed my name at the bottom. Farah Ahmed. Clear, confident, complete. When I put the pen down, my mother slid the bowl of apple slices toward me. I took one and bit into it. Sweet, crisp, real. Life continuing in small, ordinary ways. That night, I emailed the signed documents to the lawyer, and just like that, the marriage that once defined my adult life was officially over. I expected to feel something dramatic, relief, triumph, grief, but what I felt instead was quiet. A gentle quiet, like a door closing softly in a house that no longer needed that room. A week later, Imran requested one last meeting. He said he wanted to return some personal items he had found while clearing the apartment. Old notebooks, a scarf I had forgotten, a framed photo of my grandmother. I agreed to meet him in a public cafe near the old neighborhood. When I arrived, he was already seated at a corner table. He stood when he saw me. His eyes looked tired, thinner somehow. Not broken, just older. We greeted politely, strangers who once knew each other's sleeping habits. He placed a small bag on the table. "Your things," he said. "Thank you," I replied. We sat down, ordered tea. Ordinary behavior wrapped around an extraordinary history. After a moment, he spoke. "I lost everything." I looked at him calmly. "You lost what you chose to risk." He nodded slowly. "I thought I could keep both worlds. I thought I was smarter than the truth." I said nothing, because there was nothing left to explain. He looked up at me. "Do you ever think about us?" I paused, considered the question honestly. "Yes," I said, "but not with pain anymore, just memory." He smiled sadly. "I wish I could go back." I stirred my tea. "You don't miss me. You miss the version of yourself who had me." His eyes watered slightly. He didn't deny it. When we finished, I stood up, picked up the small bag on my belongings, and said, "Take care of yourself, Imran." He replied, "I'm sorry, Farah, for everything." I nodded. "I know." And then I walked away. No shouting, no dramatic farewell, just a quiet closing of a chapter. In the months that followed, I continued building my new life. I moved into a small apartment of my own, 2 rooms, a balcony, a kitchen that smelled of spices and fresh bread. I hung no wedding photos, only plants, books, a painting I loved, My space, my sanctuary. I learned how to assemble furniture, how to fix a leaking tap, how to negotiate rent, how to carry groceries alone. Each small act stitched confidence into the parts of me that had once depended too heavily on another person. Friends visited, laughed in my living room, shared stories, shared silence. Life returned in color. One morning, as I watered my balcony plants, I realized I hadn't checked Imran's social media in months, not out of discipline, but out of disinterest. He had simply faded from the center of my world. I thought back to the night I first opened his email, the subject line that shattered everything, the cold terror, the disbelief, the pain. And I understood something important. Pain is a teacher, but only if you listen to it. Mine had taught me that love without honesty is not love, that trust without verification is vulnerability, that peace built on lies is not peace at all. I had once been a woman afraid to question, afraid to look too closely, afraid that seeing the truth would destroy me. But the truth didn't destroy me. It freed me. So if you are listening and something inside you is whispering that things are not as they seem, don't silence that voice. Don't bury your doubts to keep a fragile comfort alive. You deserve clarity. You deserve respect. You deserve a love that does not require blindness. I caught my husband cheating. I used his own emails to prove it. Not to ruin him, not to punish him, but to save myself from living a life I did not choose. My story is not about revenge. It is about reclaiming power quietly, dignity gracefully, and peace finally. And if my story leaves you with one lesson, let it be this. Never be afraid of the truth. The truth may break your heart, but it will never break your spirit as deeply as a lie will. Life has a quiet way of testing whether you truly healed or whether you simply learned how to hide your scars. A year passed. The seasons changed outside my balcony. My plants grew taller. Some died. I replaced them. I learned which ones needed sunlight and which ones preferred shade. It became a small metaphor for my own heart. Some parts of me needed warmth and attention, others needed rest, and slowly I became fluent in caring for myself. I settled into routines, morning tea, work, evening walks, occasional dinners with friends. I laughed more easily now, not forced laughter, but real, light, unburdened. My life was simple, but it was mine. One evening, after a long day, I received a message request on social media from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Aisha. "Assalamu alaikum," the message read. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. Someone in my family told me about your story. I think I'm going through something similar. Can I ask you for advice?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. My first instinct was to ignore it, not because I didn't care, but because I remembered how raw those days had been, how personal, how fragile. Was I ready to step into someone else's storm? But something inside me softened. I replied, "Walaikum assalam. You're not disturbing me. Tell me what's happening." Her story unfolded over the next hour. Late nights, secretive phone habits, sudden work trips, a strange email she accidentally saw, the same confusion, the same fear, the same quiet voice telling her something was wrong. As I typed responses to her, I realized how far I had come. A year ago, I was the woman trembling over a laptop screen. Now, I was the woman offering steady words to someone else standing at that edge. "Save what you see," I told her gently. "Don't act on impulse. Protect yourself first. And remember, your worth doesn't decrease because someone lied to you. She sent back a simple message. Thank you. I feel less alone. After I closed the chat, I sat in silence for a long time. Not sadness, just reflection. Maybe this was the real closure, not just moving on, but transforming pain into something that could hold another person steady for a moment. A few weeks later, I decided to do something I had always postponed during my marriage. I enrolled in a short course on counseling skills, not to become a therapist, just to learn how to listen better, how to support people through emotional storms, how to understand the language of hurt. Sitting in a classroom again felt strange at first, but soon I found myself enjoying it. The discussions, the shared experiences, the realization that betrayal, grief, loss, they were universal languages. I wasn't unique in my pain, and somehow that made it lighter. During one class, the instructor asked, "What made you want to take this course?" I hesitated, then said simply, "I learned the cost of silence. I don't want others to feel alone in theirs." She nodded with understanding. No pity, just recognition. Months later, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter delivered in an envelope. It was from Imran. My first reaction was surprise. My second was caution, but curiosity won, and I opened it. Farah, I don't expect a reply. I only want you to know I finally understand what I lost. I'm in therapy now. I'm learning why I chose deception over honesty. I know I cannot undo the past, but I want you to know your strength forced me to face myself. I hope you're happy. You deserve peace. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not as a symbol of forgiveness, not as a door reopened, but as a reminder that truth doesn't just expose, it transforms, sometimes even the one who caused the wound. And I felt nothing dramatic, no anger, no yearning, just a quiet acknowledgement that chapters close for a reason. Another year passed. I traveled alone for the first time, a short trip to the mountains. I booked my own hotel, ate alone in restaurants, walked trails with no one beside me, and discovered something powerful. Solitude is not emptiness. It is space. Space to hear your own thoughts, space to meet yourself without distraction, space to understand who you are when no one else defines you. On the last day of the trip, I stood on a hill overlooking a valley washed in golden evening light. The wind brushed my face gently, and I whispered out loud, just to myself, "I'm proud of you." Not proud of catching him, not proud of exposing him, but proud of surviving, of choosing dignity over denial, of rebuilding instead of collapsing. When I returned home, I started volunteering once a week at a local women's support center. I didn't tell my story openly. I didn't need to. I just listened, held cups of tea, sat beside women whose eyes carried familiar storms. Sometimes healing looks like telling your story. Other times, healing looks like being the calm presence you once needed. And somewhere in those quiet afternoons, surrounded by soft voices and shared strength, I realized something profound. The worst moment of my life became the foundation of my strongest self. I didn't plan that. I didn't choose that pain, but I chose what to do after it arrived. And that is what this story is really about. Not just catching a cheating husband, not just exposing emails, but choosing truth over comfort, self-respect over fear, growth over bitterness. If you are listening to me now, know this.
You are stronger than the betrayal you didn't cause. You are wiser than the lies you once believed, and you are capable of rebuilding a life that feels peaceful again, not overnight, but step by step, breath by breath. My name is Farah. I lost a marriage to dishonesty, but I gained a life rooted in truth, and that is worth everything.
By the 3rd year after my separation, my life had settled into something that felt not just stable, but quietly meaningful. I had grown used to my apartment's rhythms, the creak of the balcony door in the wind, the way the sunlight fell across my kitchen tiles at noon, the gentle hum of the ceiling fan at night. These sounds were no longer background noise. They were the soundtrack of a life that belonged entirely to me. One evening, while reorganizing a bookshelf, I found my old wedding album tucked behind a row of novels. Thick, leather-bound, untouched since the day I left the apartment. I sat down with it on my lap, unsure of what I felt. Curiosity won. I opened the cover. There we were, younger, smiling, Imran's hand resting proudly on my shoulder, my dupatta carefully pinned, family members gathered around us, clapping, laughing, celebrating a future they believed in. I turned the pages slowly. Our honeymoon photos, the first apartment, our anniversary dinners, a decade of shared history printed in glossy paper. I expected pain. Instead, I felt tenderness, not for him, for me, for the woman in those photos who believed love was always safe, who trusted easily, who gave herself fully. She didn't deserve betrayal. She deserved honesty. And even though life didn't give her that, she had grown into someone stronger. I closed the album and placed it back on the shelf. Not hidden, not displayed, just part of the story, where it belonged. The next morning, I received a call from my father. "Farah," he said, "your cousin's daughter is getting married next month. They asked if you would help the bride with preparations. She trusts your advice." I smiled. Of course. Wedding preparations were something I once loved. The colors, the fabrics, the laughter of women gathered in a room, sharing stories and teasing the bride. Some people assumed I might avoid such events after my own marriage ended, but I didn't. I refused to let betrayal steal joy from traditions I cherished. During one of the bridal gatherings, a young girl sitting beside me whispered, "Appa, is marriage scary?" I looked at her innocent face, the genuine curiosity, the unformed expectations. "Marriage," I said gently, "is like any relationship. It depends on honesty, kindness, and respect. When those exist, it's beautiful. When they don't, you must love yourself enough to choose better." She nodded thoughtfully, not fully understanding, but seeds planted quietly grow. That night, as I walked home under a sky dusted with stars, I realized something important. I no longer felt like a victim of a story. I felt like a narrator of one. There's a difference. A victim feels dragged through events. A narrator understands the arc, the meaning, the transformation. And somewhere along the way, I had become the storyteller of my own life. A few months later, I received another message from Aisha, the woman who had first contacted me about her own suspicions. She wrote, "I followed your advice. I saved everything. I confronted him with proof. It was painful, but I didn't collapse. I wanted you to know your words mattered."
I smiled softly at the screen. Pain doesn't disappear, but shared wisdom softens its blow. Another small ripple from my story moving outward. One afternoon, while sitting on my balcony with a book, I realized I had not thought about Sana in a long time. Not with bitterness, not with curiosity. She had become a footnote in a story that was never really about her. She was a character who walked through a chapter, nothing more. The real story had always been about me, about discovering my own voice, about choosing clarity over comfort, about refusing to be erased quietly, and about understanding that betrayal is not the end of love, it is the end of illusion. Love that is real does not need secrecy to survive. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in orange and rose, I whispered another truth to myself. I am whole, not because someone chose me, but because I chose myself. And that is the lesson I carry now, the one I offer to anyone listening, to anyone sitting in doubt, to anyone afraid that uncovering the truth will destroy them. It won't. It will hurt, it will shake you, it will change you, but it will also introduce you to a version of yourself you've never met before. Stronger, clearer, braver. A version who will never again accept half love wrapped in lies. This story began with an email, a subject line, a betrayal, but it ends here, with a woman sipping tea on her balcony, at peace, at home within herself, watching the world continue, knowing she has survived her storm and grown something beautiful from the wreckage. My name is Farah. I caught my husband cheating. I used his own emails to prove it. And in the process, I proved something else too. That my worth was never dependent on his loyalty. It was always mine.
There is something no one tells you about rebuilding your life after betrayal. It isn't one grand moment of victory. It's hundreds of quiet choices made on ordinary days. Choosing to get out of bed when memories feel heavy. Choosing to cook for yourself instead of skipping meals. Choosing not to stalk someone's social media. Choosing not to reply to a late-night message. Choosing peace over curiosity. Choosing yourself again and again. By the fourth year, those choices had shaped a life that felt natural, not like a recovery, not like a temporary stage, just life. I had new routines now. Saturday mornings at the local market, Sunday afternoons reading on the balcony, Wednesday evenings volunteering at the women's center, friends who called just to share small joys, a nephew who ran to me with sticky hands and laughter, a world that no longer revolved around one man's shadow. One afternoon at the center, a woman named Rabia sat beside me. She was older than I was when my story began. Her hands shook as she held her tea. "My husband has another family," she whispered. "A whole second life. I found out last week." I didn't gasp. I didn't offer dramatic sympathy. I simply sat closer. "Breathe," I said. "You don't have to decide everything today." She looked at me with tired eyes. "How did you survive?" I thought about it for a moment. I didn't survive by being strong. I survived by being honest with myself. Her eyes filled. She nodded slowly. And I realized then how pain, once processed, becomes wisdom, how wounds, once healed, become maps for others lost in the same forest. Later that night, walking home, I felt grateful,
Not for the betrayal, never for that, but for the transformation it forced upon me. I had become someone capable of holding space for others, someone who understood that life could break you without defeating you. Another year passed. My parents grew older. My father's hair turned fully silver. My mother's knees complained more during long walks. I spent more time with them, cooked dinners, watched old dramas together, laughed at stories from my childhood. One evening, my mother said softly, "I'm proud of the woman you became." I leaned my head on her shoulder. "Me too." She smiled. "Your pain did not win." No, it didn't. That night, lying in bed, I thought of the young version of me, the woman who once believed love meant never questioning, the wife who thought trust meant never looking, the heart that assumed loyalty was guaranteed. I wanted to reach across time and hold her hands. I would tell her, "You were not foolish, you were loving, but love must be met with honesty, and if it isn't, you must love yourself enough to walk away." I didn't resent her innocence anymore. I honored it, because innocence lost becomes wisdom earned. One morning, while clearing old files on my laptop, I found the folder of evidence, screenshots, emails, hotel bookings, the digital proof that once turned my world upside down. For a moment, I considered deleting it. Then I realized something. It was no longer evidence of betrayal. It was evidence of survival. So I moved it to an external drive, labeled it simply past, and stored it away. Not as a weapon, not as a memory to revisit, but as a chapter that had been closed with dignity. Later that day, I went out for tea with a friend. We talked about work, recipes, neighborhood gossip. At one point, she said, "You seem peaceful these days." I smiled. "I am." She looked at me thoughtfully. "Do you think you'll ever marry again?" The question didn't sting me. It didn't scare me. It just existed. "Maybe," I said honestly, "but only if it adds to my peace, not replaces it." She nodded, impressed. And that was the real victory. Not closing my heart, not hardening into bitterness, but knowing that love is a choice and never a necessity for survival. That night, I stood on my balcony watching city lights shimmer in the distance. Somewhere out there, couples laughed over dinner. Somewhere else, a woman discovered an email that would change her life. Somewhere, a man typed lies into a screen, unaware of the storm ahead. Life moved in endless stories. Mine was just one of them, but it was mine. And if someone out there was listening to my story, feeling less alone in their own confusion, then every word was worth telling. Because stories don't just entertain, they guide, they warn, they heal. I caught my husband cheating. I used his own emails to prove it. But what I truly uncovered was not his betrayal. It was my strength. And that strength has carried me into a life where truth is my foundation, peace is my reward, and self-respect is my unshakable ground. I am Farah. This is where my story rests, not in revenge, not in sorrow, but in quiet triumph. By the time the 5th year arrived, my life had grown roots. Not fragile ones that could be pulled up by the next storm, but deep, steady roots formed by experience, acceptance, and self-trust. I had built routines that anchored me. I had people who loved me without condition. I had learned the sound of my own voice, not the one shaped to please others, but the one that spoke from the center of who I was.
One rainy afternoon, I received an invitation in the mail, a wedding card. Imran's cousin was getting married, and out of courtesy, his family had invited me. For a long moment, I stared at the gold lettering on cream paper. I wasn't sure what surprised me more, that they still considered me family, or that the invitation didn't trigger pain. It just existed. I decided to go. Not for him, not for old ties, but for myself, to prove that I could walk into a place connected to my past and stand there without breaking. The wedding hall was filled with music, bright fabrics, and the smell of rich food. Women hugged me warmly. Men nodded respectfully. Some people looked at me with quiet admiration, others with curiosity. No one asked questions, no one brought up the past. And then I saw Imran. Across the room, standing with relatives, smiling politely. He looked ordinary, not a villain, not a ghost, just a man living the life he had left behind. Our eyes met briefly. He walked toward me. "Farah," he said softly. "Imran," I replied. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by celebration, yet wrapped in our own small circle of history. "You look well," he said. "So do you," I replied honestly. There was no tension, no bitterness, just two people who once shared a life, now sharing a moment. He hesitated, then said, "I'm glad you came." "I'm glad I did too," I said, and that was all. We parted. No drama, no longing, just closure sealed by time. As I sat later at my table sipping tea, watching the bride laugh with her friends, I realized how far I had traveled. Once, the sight of Imran would have reopened wounds. Now, it simply reminded me of a chapter completed. That night, driving home, I turned on the radio. A song played, one I used to love during my marriage. I sang along quietly, not with nostalgia, but with freedom. Another year passed. I turned 40, a number that once would have scared me, but now felt like a milestone of survival, of maturity, of grace earned through fire. I hosted a small dinner, friends, family, laughter, good food, stories that stretched late into the night. At one point, my nephew climbed into my lap and said, "Aunt Farah, you're my favorite grown-up." Everyone laughed, but I felt tears prick my eyes, because once I thought my greatest identity would be wife, maybe mother, a role defined by others. Now I was simply Farah, whole, enough, loved. After everyone left, I cleaned the dishes slowly, contentedly. The apartment smelled of spices and cake and tea. My phone buzzed with messages, birthday wishes, emojis, warm words. I sat down with a final cup of tea and whispered to myself, "You made it." Not just past betrayal, past fear, past heartbreak. I had made it to a place where life was not defined by what someone did to me, but by what I chose to build after. And I thought again of the email that started everything, the subject line that exposed the lie, the moment I clicked open and unknowingly opened a new life. Some people say they wish they had never discovered the truth, that ignorance is bliss. I disagree. Ignorance is a cage. Truth is the door. Even when it slams open with force, even when the light hurts your eyes at first, once you step through, you realize the cage was never home. Home is where you are free. So if you're listening to this and you're standing at the edge of your own discovery, afraid to look, afraid to know, let me hold your hand for a moment through these words. You will survive the truth. You will cry,
You will doubt yourself. You will feel lost. But one day you will wake up and realize you no longer measure your worth by someone else's choices. You will drink tea in a quiet home, laugh with people who see you, walk under open skies with steady steps, and you will say, as I did, I made it. My name is Farah. I caught my husband cheating. I used his own emails to prove it, and I walked through fire to build a life that feels like peace.
There is a moment in healing that no one warns you about. Not the moment you discover the betrayal, not the moment you confront it, not even the moment you walk away, but the moment you realize that your story has quietly become someone else's strength. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was sitting in the Women's Support Center helping arrange chairs for a small group session. The walls were painted soft beige. The kettle hissed in the corner. The air smelled of cardamom tea and comfort. A new woman walked in, early 30s, nervous eyes, hands twisting together. She sat across from me, silent at first. Then she said, I heard you went through something similar. I nodded gently. Yes. She swallowed. I found messages on my husband's phone yesterday. I haven't slept since. I didn't offer advice immediately. I just poured her tea, sat beside her, let her breathe. Finally, she whispered, I feel stupid. I shook my head. You are not stupid. You trusted. That is not a flaw. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She exhaled for the first time since entering the room. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. The story that once shattered me had become a lantern for others walking through darkness. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was guiding. On my walk home that evening, the sky was streaked with purple and gold. Children played cricket in the street. A vendor called out about fresh fruit. Ordinary life unfolding around me. And yet, something inside me felt sacred, because purpose had quietly entered my life. Not the purpose I once thought I'd have, raising children, growing old beside a husband, but a new purpose, born from experience, from empathy, from understanding pain not from textbooks, but from scars. Another few months passed. One morning I woke with a strange restlessness. I brewed tea, opened my balcony door, and sat in the morning sun. Birds hopped along the railing. The city stretched awake beneath me. I opened my notebook, something I had started keeping after the separation, and began to write. Not about Imran, not about betrayal, but about lessons, truth, boundaries, self-worth, silence, courage, rebuilding, peace. Page after page flowed, not as a victim telling her tragedy, but as a woman offering perspective. By noon, I had written nearly 20 pages. I stared at the notebook and thought, maybe this story deserves to be told beyond just conversations. A seed planted quietly. In the weeks that followed, I started organizing my notes, turning scattered reflections into a cohesive narrative. Not revenge, not gossip, just a story of emotional survival. I didn't know if I'd ever publish it, but writing felt like closing a final loop, transforming pain into language, language into meaning. One evening, while editing a paragraph, I paused and laughed softly. It began with emails, and now here I was, writing my own. Not secret messages, not lies,
but open, honest words meant to heal. The irony was gentle, full circle, poetic. That night, I emailed Aisha to check on her. She replied quickly, "I left. I'm living with my sister now. It's hard, but I'm free." I closed my eyes, smiling. Free. The word echoed inside me. Freedom had been the true gift hidden beneath the betrayal. Not freedom from a man, but freedom from illusions, from fear, from dependence, from silence. Another year drifted by. My hair now carried a few silver strands. I wore them proudly, each one a witness to time lived, fully, not passively, not blindly, but consciously. I attended another wedding, another celebration. This time, when the young bride asked me for advice, I didn't talk about marriage. I talked about self-respect, about choosing a partner who listens, about never ignoring your intuition. She nodded, wide-eyed. Seeds planted again. And so life continued. No dramatic twists, no sudden romances, no grand revenge, just steady days, purposeful work, shared laughter, quiet nights. A life lived with open eyes. Some stories end with reconciliation. Some end with punishment. But my story ended with something quieter. Acceptance. Growth. Peace. I caught my husband cheating. I used his own emails to prove it. But the real story was never about him. It was about a woman who refused to let betrayal define her ending. A woman who chose truth over comfort, who chose dignity over denial, who chose herself. And if you take anything from my journey, let it be this. Sometimes the life that breaks you is not the one you were meant to live. Sometimes the door that slams shut behind you is the very thing that pushes you toward the path meant for you all along. My name is Farah. This was my story. A story of pain, a story of proof, a story of power, and most importantly, a story of peace.
The 6th year after everything happened arrived so quietly that I almost didn't notice it. No anniversary date marked on a calendar, no reminder notification, no heavy wave of memory crashing down, just a morning like any other. Sunlight spilling across my kitchen counter, the whistle of the kettle, the soft hum of a waking city. I poured my tea and stood by the window, and it hit me, gently, like a breeze. I had gone an entire day, then a week, then a month, without remembering I was once betrayed. Not because I had forgotten, but because it no longer defined me. There was a difference. I still remember the night I opened that laptop, the email, the words, the cold rush through my veins. I remembered the screenshots, the lawyer's office, the suitcase at the door. I remembered all of it. But memory had turned into history, and history no longer held power over my present. That morning, I sat at my small dining table, opened my notebook, and wrote a final sentence under the last page of reflections. I am no longer surviving. I am living. I closed the notebook. Done. Later that week, I visited my parents. My mother was preparing lunch. My father read the newspaper. The home smelled of comfort and cumin and familiarity. I sat between them, and for a moment I simply listened to the sounds of family life. My mother looked at me and said, "You seem settled." I nodded. "I am." She smiled softly. That is all a mother wants for her child. And in that moment, I realized something important. Peace is not loud. Peace is not dramatic. Peace is the quiet confidence of knowing you can lose everything and still rebuild, that you can be lied to and still trust yourself, that you can be broken and still choose to live life. A few days later, I received an email notification. For a second, my heart skipped, a reflex from an old wound. Then I smiled at myself. It was just a work message. I opened it calmly. No fear, no memory, no storm. Just an email. I thought of the irony again. Once, emails destroyed my illusion. Now, emails were simply emails. And that was when I knew I had crossed the final bridge. The past no longer controlled my nervous system. The betrayal no longer lived in my body. I had processed it fully. I had outgrown it. One evening, I went for a walk alone. The air was cool, the streetlights warm. A child rode a bicycle nearby. A couple shared roasted corn from a street vendor. Life flowed in ordinary beauty. I walked slowly, breathing deeply, feeling the ground under my feet. Not floating in fear, not sinking in sadness, just present. And I whispered, not out of pain, but out of gratitude, "Thank you." Not to him, not to the betrayal, but to life, for showing me who I am when everything false falls away. I returned home, opened my balcony door, and sat with one last cup of tea for the night. I thought about you, the listener, the one who clicked on this story, maybe curious, maybe hurting, maybe searching. So before I close my story, let me speak directly to your heart. If you are in the middle of betrayal, I see you. If you are collecting proof, I understand you. If you are afraid to confront the truth, I remember that fear. If you are rebuilding your life, I honor your courage. And if you are already on the other side, living quietly, peacefully, I celebrate you. Because the end of a marriage is not the end of a life. Sometimes it is the beginning of your truest one. My name is Farah. I caught my husband cheating. I used his own emails to prove it. But in the end, the greatest proof I found was this: I was always stronger than the lie that tried to break me. And this is where my story finally rests. In truth, in dignity, in peace.